The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of ParaX, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Step outside of your comfort zone. See the world with a whole new perspective. Join us and experience the unexplained on the Paranormal View.
And welcome everybody right here to the Paranormal View on the ParaX Radio Network. I want to thank everyone for being with us tonight, those here in the chat room and those listening from around the world. We appreciate each and every one. Got a great show lined up for tonight, and we got a great guest. She's been on before, and everybody just loves her. So with that, we have tonight with us Barbara Duncan.
Good evening, everyone.
And we have Jeffrey Gould. Maybe. Jeff, you with us? He done run away. Somebody scared him off.
Oh, he's trying to talk.
Oh, is that what it is? I don't know why. He had that problem last week, too. So, anyway, if Jeff would come on. Because I didn't get the bio. You got the bio, Barbara?
I don't.
I don't either.
He did not send it to me.
Ah, Jeff.
But she's been on before, so
great.
we
I'm
can
breaking up
just...
already.
Oh,
There you go. There
All
he
right.
is. Go for it.
Jeff, you on now? He was in second. Come on, Jeff. You was on. Say something.
He's breaking up.
Okay, go ahead,
I can't
Barbara.
talk. Okay. Well, she's been on before, folks. A very lovely lady, a published author of both books, and I believe she has a tarot and oracle deck. Please welcome back to the show, Llewellyn author Deborah Blake.
Hi, thanks. Do I have to introduce myself now? Oh, because I can do that. So yes, I have 12 books on modern witchcraft with Llewellyn, and the Everyday Witchcraft Tarot deck, and the Everyday Witchcraft, the Everyday Witch Oracle deck. Plus, there's a mini tarot for those of you who like cute. Plus, I've written a whole bunch of novels with Berkeley, and I'm just generally an all-around nice person. There you go.
All right. Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, tonight.
Oh, and we must, and we're also saying that you're also thawing out from a major snowstorm up in the Northeast.
I am. I live in upstate New York, and we got 29 inches of snow where I am. And just as we were sort of starting to bounce back from that, it got down to -9 last night. So I'm ready to move pretty much anywhere else. Who's going to take me in with my 4 cats?
It's a shame I sold my big house.
Lord, it's looking good.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Northeast is very beautiful. It has all those lovely trees turning color, during the fall and whatever. But then it gets
they're all
really
white now. That's their color now, is white.
Yeah.
with ice all over it.
Yeah, we
really got slammed. This one, and we don't usually get them this early in the season. December, you might get a few inches of snow.
Mm-hmm.
That's not unusual, but yeah, this was a doozy.
It was, yeah. And I follow this thing called the French Toast Alert, which is out of Massachusetts. And the French Toast Alerts go by slices, and it was up to 4 slices.
Wow.
I hope there was bacon with that.
That was my comment to him, is like, how many slices of bacon goes with that?
Exactly. Well, my plan is actually to reward myself with bacon tomorrow morning because I survived it.
Yeah. I think everybody deserves French toast and bacon tomorrow.
Oh, I think that sounds like a darn good plan.
Yeah.
Darn good plan.
Wow. Jeff, you make it back on yet? No. Still not
Nope,
there.
it says he left. He's been beamed up by the mothership.
I believe that.
Well, you know, all those monoliths, somebody was bound to get abducted.
Yeah, eventually,
Yeah.
yes. Tonight, though, we want to talk about, everybody talks about Christmas and they talk about Yule, and we want to talk about what's the difference and what is Yule.
Well, Yule is actually sort of the origin of Christmas, although, obviously there are some major differences. Yule is another name for the winter solstice, which is on or about December 21st every year. This year it is Monday, this coming Monday. It is the
I'm sure that was Jeff.
He just said "arg." I feel like that a lot. Yeah. It's a pirate holiday. So it's a very worldwide holiday. I mean, Yule is one particular name for it. It tends to come from Europe, but the winter solstice is celebrated all across the world because it is an astronomical phenomenon besides being a spiritual thing. It is the shortest day and the longest night of the year. And one of the things that I find so fascinating about it is that many of the traditions that most of us associate with Christmas actually are derived from Yule or from the way the winter solstice was celebrated around the world. And I didn't actually realize that until I became a witch and a pagan, because I was brought up Jewish, and so I honestly didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the Christmas stuff. In my house, we didn't have a lot to do with that, and it wasn't until I went out into the world and became a witch that I went, wait, a lot of this stuff sounds a lot like Christmas. And all of my pagan friends went, well, duh. So yeah, many of the traditions of Yule are going to sound really familiar when I start talking about them. First of all, because it's the shortest day of the year, after that, the light starts coming back more and more every day. And so the holiday celebrates the return of the light, the return of the sun, S-U-N, but still, it's a little familiar, right? And it's celebrated traditionally by bringing greenery, including a tree, into the house to symbolize the life in the midst of death, basically. Everything else around you, especially if you live in upstate New York, pretty much everything is dead except the evergreen trees, which are still out there and doing really well. It also, in the Wiccan symbolism and a lot of the sort of classic Celtic and European traditions that Wiccan symbolism comes from, it marks the end of the reign of the Holly King, who represented the dark half of the year, and he's overthrown by the Oak King, who represents the light half of the year. And the interesting thing about the Holly King is he was usually depicted as, this white-haired, plump guy with a beard. Any of this starting to sound familiar?
Interesting.
Yeah, to me, it's really cool because it sort of demonstrates the way a new religion, which Christianity doesn't think of itself as a new religion, but when you look in the span of humanity, it is sort of adapted and adopted some of the parts of an older religion into its own.
Mm-hmm. You brought about the Christmas tree part of it. Now, what about the Yule log itself? Because I'm fascinated by that.
that something was celebrated a little bit differently in, like it was a Swedish custom. It was generally a sort of European custom, and it was done a little bit differently depending on where you were. But what they would do usually is they'd cut a hunk of log, and they would usually decorate it. Sometimes they would, it probably originated in Norway, but at the height of its popularity, it could be found across Europe. A whole log was brought into the house, and of course that was back in the days when people heated with this gigantic fireplace, so you could fit a whole log into it. And it was burned to bring prosperity and protection to the household throughout the year. It was sometimes decorated beforehand. It might be something like my group, Blue Moon Circle. We one year created a Yule log, which one of our members was very handy. And so what she did is she drilled holes into a hunk of wood, a nice little piece of log. And we put candles for each person who was in the group. And throughout the year before Yule, it would spend a month at everybody's house, and they would decorate it and they would add something to it. And then when we all got together for our traditional Yule dinner party, which, needless to say, we're not having this year, we lit those candles to celebrate the fact that even when we weren't together, we were all part of one big thing. And traditionally, they would burn most of the Yule log and save a little bit until the next year, and then light the old Yule log and start the new Yule log off of it to sort of symbolize the continuity of one year to another. And there is a fun kind of Yule log. One of our group members made a cake that's called a Yule log one year, which is chocolate rolled around cream. And I got to tell you, that to me is the best kind of Yule log.
Most definitely. Yeah. Well, okay, if it's Norwegian, then that would explain how Scotland got a hold of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing about Europe is it's really small. We don't think about it because it's all these different countries, but Norway and Britain and Scotland and all of these places were not very far from each other. And so the Nordic traditions and the Germanic traditions and the Celtic traditions had a lot of crossover because they really were, you could pick them all up and put them in New Jersey. Well, all right, not quite, but it's, and I don't know why you'd want to do that, but nonetheless, it's all of these people traveled back and forth and exchanged traditions. I'm going to get letters. But so there was a certain crossover from one country to another country.
Yeah, they said
most definitely.
They said that the Yule log was a Christmas-tide tradition. The log was used for the fire, but there was some other Yule traditions. They had the Yule goat, Yule boar, and the Yule singing also.
And don't forget Yule Brenner.
Yule Brenner, yeah.
Make her stop. I don't believe that Yule Brenner had anything to do with these holidays, but I could be wrong, and he's not around to ask. Well, I'm sorry, I got completely distracted. So yes, Yule traditions. Well, if you listen to carols, Christmas carols, they talk about the Yuletide Mary, because a lot of the traditions that came over to the New World, where we live, came from Europe, and they celebrated Yule there. The funny thing about Yule as a holiday in Europe, and actually initially in America in the New World, was it was actually a party holiday. It was raucous, and it was banned for a while because they thought it was like too rowdy, which I just think makes it sound all the more fun. But they talk about people going a wassail. There's that Christmas carol. We will go a wassailing, a la 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 la.
Like, yeah.
So the wassail was a drink. Well, it still is a drink. We've made it, which had usually a fair amount of alcohol in it. And what would happen is this is where the tradition of caroling came from. People would go from one house to another house, and at each house they would sing a song, and the reward for singing the song would be they would be given a drink. And then they would go to the next house and they would sing a song and they'd be given a drink. And you can imagine that by the time they hit the end of town, the wassailing was pretty wild. And so, so that is where that comes from. I'll bet nobody will ever listen to that wassailing carol the same exact way again.
Yeah, that's what it was about. And the Yule goat and the Yule boar today, we consider it as a ham right. For Christmas. Yeah. So we still incorporated those traditions, I guess, over into our Christmas season, you might say.
Oh, absolutely. And people do actually still make some version of wassail. The one we tend to use is actually pretty simple. We take cider, we add red wine, usually some spices like cinnamon and allspice and those kind of, sort of hot mulled cider spices. Some people take a slice of orange and stick some cloves in it, and then you heat it up. Now, in the old days, they would heat it up with a hot poker. I hate to be a party pooper. We usually used a crock pot. It was a lot easier than the whole hot poker thing.
Oh, yeah.
Some people would, in fact, instead of red wine, use whiskey, which would explain the drunken singing. And probably, in Europe, they used whatever was the alcohol that they happened to have, most common in their area. But you can make it without the alcohol. You can just heat cider and put the spices in it and have a children-friendly wassail.
That's the way to do it. Okay. Jeff, are you on yet?
I'm hoping I'm on. I'm actually trying the new phone. How does it sound?
Oh, yeah, you're sounding okay.
Yay. Okay, cool. I'll have to listen to the playbacks to see how it says, because I know when I used the other phone during a show once when I was house sitting down in San Pedro, the audio was awful on the playback, so hopefully it sounds better.
Oh, no, this is good.
Well, It sounds fine to me.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're talking about Yule. How did Saturnalia come into it? Or does it?
Well, Saturnalia was a Roman version of the holiday, and they didn't have snow there. They tended to be, warmer and mellower. So they mostly just made a big giant party out of it. And their version celebrated, as one might expect from the name, Saturn, the Roman god. And again, it was pretty much a big old party. They were less likely to have some of the same symbology, but it still was, around the time of year when the winter solstice fell. So they were still celebrating, the return of the sun and the fact that the year was switching from the old year to the new year. That tends to be a pretty common theme, no matter which country that, you're checking in on.
So that's like the Yule and the Christmas together, and I guess it was kind of like a
It's one
12-day
big party.
Wasn't it a 12-day festival?
It
Kind of.
might have been. I'm not as up on my Saturnalia as I should be.
I actually, on my Facebook, as my cover, I said, to you and yours, happy Saturnalia. And it was like a Renaissance painting underneath of not quite a Bacchanalia, but pretty close. And Richard Sennett, I think it was Richard Sennett, posted saying, they have too much clothes on. And then
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah,
to which I replied,
is pretty mild compared to the earlier celebrations.
Yeah, but I replied to him, I'm sure that if you were to ask them, they would give the shirt off their Bacchanalia.
Yeah, you figure that if people understood what really happened under the mistletoe, they wouldn't have it in the house.
Well, the
maybe.
Jews must have known one thing or another.
Yeah, I think they did.
So when did the winter solstice start?
It always started on the 21st.
Of December?
Usually, thereabouts.
You mean, when did the celebration start? Or when did it's? I mean, the solstice is a phenomenon.
It's an astronomical
Yeah.
event.
So did they celebrate the 12 days leading up to that?
Oh no, the solstice is
No.
one day, and as far as they can tell from everything I've read, it has been celebrated pretty much for all the time that there has been, reasonably civilized people, and by reasonably civilized I mean that come together at all. The solstices, the winter solstice and the summer solstice, are some of the most ancient observed holidays or days in the calendar, if you want to call it a calendar, because they didn't actually have this calendar at that point. But because they were something that apparently could be identified by even the most ancient peoples, there are indications that the winter solstice and the summer solstice have been celebrated pretty much as long as there's been any kind of civilization.
And probably pre-civilization.
Yeah, I mean anything that the Egyptians knew about it. Everybody knew about it. In fact, civilizations that you would not think could understand, could read the stars, could know what was going on, apparently knew.
Pretty much any agrarian society would have to know, because that was pretty much the points. The solstice and the equinox points were harvest and planting and agricultural related. So.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things that was traditional for the winter solstice or Yule was, in Europe at least, they would usually cull the herds. They would bless the animals, and then they would slaughter the ones that they couldn't keep going through the winter, and they would have this huge feast because it was the only time of the year that they actually had enough meat that everybody could have some. And then they would preserve what they could preserve of it, and it would slowly dwindle down until they got to the end of the winter when everybody was eating twigs and leaves.
Yeah. Well, that's some fiber in your diet.
Yes.
So that's pretty much why why Christmas is at this time of the year.
Well, I don't wish to be burned in effigy on people's lawns, but it is interesting that originally the most celebrated Christian holiday was Easter, which of course celebrated, Christ, and the celebration of his birthday on December 25th came later, like quite a bit later, and there is some indication that, in fact, he was not born in the middle of the winter because they had shepherds leading their flocks, which would be a springtime thing, not a winter thing. And the speculation is that the church, as a sort of political entity, said, well, we want to take all these pagans and get them on board. Let's take one of their most popular holidays and we'll figure out a way to integrate it into our system of, religious belief and, make them celebrate it, our way. And so theoretically, and I'm not making this up, I'm just saying it's what the books say. You again, don't send me letters. That is the general historic belief that's why it ended up being said to be December 25th. There was nothing in the Bible that said he was born on December 25th. In fact, there was no actual calendar at that point.
Yeah.
True.
Well, apparently most biblical scholars indicate that Jesus as a teacher was probably born, like you say, in the spring or early summer. Apparently, December 25th, by the time it was selected as Jesus' birthday, was they had all sorts of famous battles that had taken place. So it like you say, it managed to absorb the time around the solstice, but they chose the 25th because it had other meaningful events. So it kind of conglomerated a whole lot of stuff into one date, which is sort of like when people have their birthday on the 25th, so they only get half their gifts.
Yeah, no, my stepdaughter is a New Year's baby, and so she always got people giving her gifts for Christmas / your birthday, and she wasn't too pleased about that.
Really. My mother's birthday is the original Memorial Day, May 30th, and when she was growing up, she always thought the parades were for her.
Well, and who's to say they weren't?
Exactly.
Well, one of the things that I always found really fascinating about the symbolism of Yule and the symbolism of Christmas is that in the cycle that we call the Wheel of the Year for pagans, the goddess and the god go through various changes, and the goddess starts out in the spring as a young woman and the god as a young man, and then in the summer they get married and they have a baby, and or she gets pregnant, and they have this whole fertility thing. And what happens at Yule is that the goddess as mother, because she's either maiden, mother, or crone, in her guise as mother, she gives birth to her son, the new year, who is also the sun, S-U-N. And so this symbolism of celebrating the mother and her newborn child far predates Christianity. That was part of the winter solstice pagan celebration for a very long time. And in part, it's because of, that symbolism of the sun returning, the goddess rebirthing the light, which is, very much part of that idea of, the Christ child as bringing light back into the world. And to me, I like it. I like the fact that those things are the same.
It would make sense that even in the days when it wasn't politically correct to be pagan, you could privately, should I say occultly, celebrate within the confines of the religion simply by intent. You could
Absolutely.
go to church and go through that, but still observe the pagan tradition.
Well, and, it's interesting because, I run an artist cooperative shop in my real life when I'm not writing. And one of my artists was talking to me the other day. He's not particularly religious, but he's sort of scholarly. He's studied religious things a lot. And he was telling me that in many sort of, the Catholic part of Christianity, that the Mary, who is not a goddess, she's just a mom, but that most people prayed to Mary. They didn't pray to God. They didn't pray to Jesus. They prayed to Mary as mother to help them. And, I thought, well, gee, that sounds familiar, because I pray to the goddess all the time. But yeah, he said, people do the rosary. They do it to Mary. They're not asking, the stern father for help. They're asking this mother figure. And, I think at Christmas, you see all these beautiful, beautiful pictures of her, as mother with her newborn child. And I think that symbolism can be found in every culture going back a very long time.
Plus, the Mary statues are often in the open-handed goddess position.
They are. Well, there's goddesses and there's goddesses, and they're all good.
Well, I also noticed that back in the day when the churches were trying to absorb local pagans, was to build their massive structures where the pagans would meet for their Sabbaths and rituals. And they're like, there's a big building where we used to meet. And they're like, oh, come on in, and such like that. But a lot of
done purposely. They basically found the sacred spaces where people had been gathering for eons and built a church on top of them, so that the only way you could go to your sacred space was to go to their church.
Exactly.
One of the things that sort of interests me is that if you look at a lot of the very old churches, many of them actually have green men, that symbol of the green man, carved onto the church, because that was the way to get the pagans inside.
That was exactly where I was going to go with that, was pointing out that since the local paganry were often conscripted into building the stuff of the church, they put in all of their symbology into the workings and the architecture.
We're sneaky people. Sneaky.
Yeah. Have you seen the T-shirt that has the hooded monk with the beads and pulling a red wagon with a Yule tree with a star on top, an Easter bunny and a colored egg, saying, wow, for a religion that doesn't like us, you sure stole a lot of our stuff.
Oh, no, I need that T-shirt. Send me that T-shirt. I need that T-shirt.
I'll send you the graphic for sure. That's
my God, that's great. Well, and that is true. Yule is not the only holiday. The winter solstice is not the only holiday that Christianity co-opted. Easter absolutely has a lot of symbolism from the spring equinox, and there's pretty much every holiday, they went, well, that works for them, let's just use that. Why reinvent the wheel?
There's a very little, I mentioned this to a few of our guests, there's a little known film that I saw mainly because it starred Laura Prepon, but in it, this young man has a very Carrie mother level religious mother, and at one point he goes out to celebrate Halloween, and she says, that's based on a pagan tradition, and he goes, well, yeah, so's Christmas.
And did she murder him on the spot?
I don't think so, but he pulls those little digs, and I always enjoyed those.
Wow.
Yeah, they don't take lightly to that.
So, how many things? I know they have a lot of things dealing with Christmas, festivals and stuff. So, what about the festivals for Yule? Do they still have those around? I mean, is there out there that people don't know?
In Europe, they have plenty of winter solstice festivals. My group normally in a not crazy year, we have a Yule dinner party every year, and we gather together and we each, bring a dish to share, and we exchange gifts and, do the whole thing. This year, sadly, we are not doing it because there was no safe way to do that. And so we're gonna pass, and we will do it next year. And instead, what we decided to do was we pulled names, and everybody's gonna send one gift to one person, and then on Yule we'll open them all up as if we were together.
So,
But yeah, there are
the whole idea of having celebrations via Zoom call probably don't work very well.
Well, it works better than getting together.
True.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I have to cook all the food now. That's not good. Actually, I'm pretty sure my Yule dinner party this year is going to be, shrimp and some wine. It's going to be a much simpler party.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is true. You don't get that feeling of being together by Zoom. Although, my family did a Zoom Thanksgiving call, and we managed to hit 4 states and 2 countries, and we still got to feel like we were, together in some way or another. So it's not terrible.
So when you have these get-togethers without getting together, I assume then that's more wine for you to drink.
I admit nothing. And there might also be more cake for me, but I will not admit that either. In fact, I got a housemate this year. She came for a couple of weeks to hide out from the pandemic, and she's still here. That was more. But she's my cat sitter and the cat's lover, so it's okay. But she actually happens to also be a pagan, which works out pretty well. So she doesn't mind that we're doing Yule dinner party together, the 2 of us, instead of doing Christmas. But yeah, her one big request was that I make my famous rum cake. So that's going to be our big thing, is whatever we have for dinner, plus some wine, plus a rum cake.
Wow.
Yum.
So,
Well, actually, there's a good, and I have to find it again. An Israeli friend of mine told me about it, gave me the recipe, and I lost it, for matzah cake, and it's dipped in brandy.
Ooh. All right. Well, if you find it, send it to me.
I will send it to you. Yes.
Because I would eat
It was
that.
awesome.
wow.
Oh, it was awesome.
A brandy, huh?
Yeah, matzah. It was soaked in brandy, and it had chocolate and cream cheese in it. Just so good.
Okay, I'm on board.
I will find it. I will send you a copy.
Okay, promise, because that might be my only Yule present this year.
Oh, ouch.
So-
okay.
I know that for Thanksgiving, you had these monster-type, ugly-looking things that would walk down the streets. For Christmas, you got the ugly-looking monster that comes looking for the bad kids.
Krampus
How
is
did
the
they?
Krampus.
Yeah,
ugly
Krampus.
monster.
How did they dressed up for the Yule?
I don't know that they did much. I mean, sometimes people would sort of do a little play with the Holly King and the Oak King, having this mock battle to fight for the throne. And, the Holly King would be overthrown and the Oak King would win. And, that would represent the lighter part of the year, the younger part of the year coming in. But it wasn't like people dressed up like Santa Claus. I haven't come across a whole lot of documentation about people dressing up. I think it was really cold, and mostly they just put on their woolly underwear.
If that.
And have a big bonfire to keep warm.
Exactly.
or a big Yule
amongst other
log.
things to keep warm.
Well,
Activities.
once you go a wassailing, all bets
How do you
are off.
think we have so many? How do you think we have so many Virgos?
Hey, wait a minute. My sister's a Virgo.
Uh-oh.
All right.
There you
I don't
go.
want to talk about this.
So I would assume then that it's a big party when you're doing one of these things.
Well, I mean, these days it's a little calmer. And, I mean, I can't speak for, every pagan group, but for most of it is really a celebration of light and hope. It's the whole idea of the returning of the light, and we usually, light a bunch of candles to symbolize that light and that hope coming back. And, we exchange gifts. We usually play some games. Of course, if you've got kids, some of the people in my group have kids, and, the kids, get a lot of gifts and get spoiled rotten. Sort of like, any other, holiday celebration. We're not as raucous about it as they used to be back in the day. I think really there's not a heck of a lot of difference between a Yule celebration and a Christmas celebration, except that we're celebrating slightly different people.
So when the Pilgrims came over to the country, did they come over doing Yule, or were they
Actually,
doing
they
Christmas?
came over and banned Yule because it was too much of a party. Those Pilgrims were kind of party poopers. I don't know if you noticed in historical things, but yeah, they came over and basically said, we're not going to do that here. And then, of course, everybody did it anyway. But no, they were not fans. Go figure.
Huh.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, they banned crosses, crucifixes, all of that because
Yeah, no, they banned
idols,
pretty much everything.
I always like the running joke where they say, certain activity could lead to dancing.
Could lead to dancing.
Yeah. Can't have that.
Oh, heck no.
That is funny.
So the whole idea of bringing the outside indoors, because obviously you had to stay indoors during the winter months or freeze to death, was the whole kind of thing for the Christmas trees and bringing the greenery in. That was considered good luck for the next year.
Well, it was considered good luck for the next year. It was also just a way, again, to celebrate life in the midst of what was otherwise a fairly dead time. Interestingly enough, these days at Christmas time, the colors are red and green, and those come from the evergreens and from the berries of like the mistletoe, which was came from the holly, and those were basically used just as we put up lights now to cheer things up. They brought in this live greenery and the berries and things to cheer things up. It was sort of like it is in many parts of this country where it's winter and you either have snow or you've got a lot of rain and drizzle and not a lot of light. It was a way to keep people's spirits up, I think, and also to just have that celebration of life and the fact that life continued even when things outside were a little grim. All the crops were gone, and most of the things that grew were in their dormant season. Unless you're in the desert with a cactus or something, pretty much everything had died down except things like the evergreens and the mistletoe and the holly, which kept going. And so they brought them inside as a way to, I think, probably stave off seasonal depression.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Well,
Well,
is with Deck the Halls, there's not a single reference to Christmas in there.
Oh no. Well, a lot of the traditional carols actually have nothing to do with Christmas. We will go a wassailing. They don't mention Christmas. It's all about the drinking and the caroling. And you celebrate the Yuletide Merry is actually about the Yule. I mean, there are Christmas songs, but a lot of them are just about the celebration in general. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I actually rather like Christmas songs, although I'm not a Christian or I don't celebrate Christmas. They're cheerful, and cheerful is good.
yeah, that's where people goes out caroling in groups, and it's the same thing. They go out singing the songs and go around. A lot of them has candles, and so it's pretty much just about every tradition evolves from bits and parts of others.
Well,
No,
Henry, you're aware that you've got a series of historical and or mythical characters who all have the share a same mythos,
Oh, sure.
such as Horus, Buddha, and such like that, and Jesus. They all have very similar storylines.
Yes.
They all had the same number of disciples. They all died and were resurrected and such like that.
Well, rebirth is a real theme of this particular holiday. That's the infant God is reborn after having died, usually at the harvest time. Just the God was sacrificed for the good of the harvest and for the continuation of the land and prosperity, and then he was reborn, at the solstice. And the idea of the light returning, that's also a kind of rebirth, that the earth itself goes through this cycle where the light dims and then it comes back brighter. And even if you look at Hanukkah, which of course is, based on a Jewish calendar and is not specifically related to, one particular date, but it's called the Festival of Lights, and it was full of miracles. And to me, it's all sort of part of this same theme of the light returning, of the miracle that no matter how dark it gets, the light comes back. And that idea that we together help to rekindle the light in each other. And for me, that's what makes the holiday so special, is that, it isn't one person celebrating, it's a lot of people celebrating.
And the one tradition that always amazed me that I haven't seen come back yet was originally around Christmas time was a time when people told ghost stories.
Yeah, apparently, it's funny you mentioned that. I was reading an article just the other day, which I sort of stumbled across by accident. Oh, no, it wasn't. I was on, I think it was the Magical Buffet blog, which is a wonderful, wonderful blog. You should have Rebecca Elson on to talk to you because she's terrific. She has this blog called The Magical Buffet, and she's very into Krampus. And so she was talking a lot about him. And apparently, ghost stories started out being more of a phenomenon of the solstice, the winter solstice, and they decided it was too depressing at that time of year when everything was dark, so they sort of shifted them to Samhain, to Halloween, and, went with that whole idea, in Samhain, it's all about the veil being thin between the worlds and you can speak to your ancestors. So, yeah, apparently there was a lot of creepy stuff that happened at the solstice time, and that's the first I've ever heard of that. I had no idea. I felt like I was really missing out.
Oh,
well, good.
yeah, I mean, A Christmas Carol was the perfect ghost story.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
But it was Christmas, and it was those three ghosts that always showed up, and it made sense that it was a holiday tradition. in that you wanted people to reflect their behavior for the past year and maybe change it.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Can we bring that back this year?
could we? Yeah.
I'm not saying any people in particular. I'm just
Uh-oh.
saying in general.
Uh-oh, I'm glad I'm not
That
on
we
that
could
list.
invoke those 3 ghosts? Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that.
That'd be a good idea.
Take and send me her information, and I'll see if we can get her on.
I will. She's terrific. She has a lot of knowledge about all sorts of, not just pagan things, but paranormal, esoteric. Yeah, she would be a perfect match for you guys. You'll adore her.
Well, that sounds good. That's another one I'll put on the list for next year.
There you go. I was going to say, well, that's a long time away, but that's like a week and a half.
Yeah, it's not very long now.
I have completely lost track of the date, the time, I don't know where we're at. This year, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just kind of like all of a sudden everything run together and you wake up one day and, wow, where'd it go to?
Yeah, it was a very strange year. A very strange year. I'm not.
Yeah, but the story. Yeah, but the script writers wrote in the murder hornets and completely didn't do anything with them.
Well, I'm sure they'll come back in another episode, and we'll be like, "Oh, them! We knew they were going to show up again."
Yeah, but what's going to happen with the season finale? God's help us.
Oh, please! I'm like hanging on by a thread as it is. Don't you give me any ghost stories now. No scary stuff.
Oh, you don't want none?
Well, I love collecting. I love collecting and reposting images on Instagram. And one had a historical photo of somebody having found this crystal dagger that was like so many thousands and thousands of years old. And somebody posted a reply saying, keep that handy for the season finale of 2020 for when the dead come walking.
Oh, yeah, no, the zombie apocalypse is really the only thing we haven't hit yet. So I'm figuring, December 27, December 28. It's gonna, zombie apocalypse. That's my bet for the end of the year. Although I don't know, I feel pretty zombie-like myself, so maybe it's already happened.
A lot of people have.
Yeah, but you'll never be hungry enough to eat fruitcake.
No, actually, I'm allergic to fruitcake. I can't eat it.
Nobody can. I don't think it's designed for actual human consumption.
Yeah, no, those preserved fruits that are like they have sulfites and crap in them, they actually will like kill me. So I have a medical excuse not to eat fruitcake.
Well, those are good because if you get one, you just save it till next year and send it to somebody else. Yeah, regift it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hear they make great doorstops.
I was just going to say, you keep stealing my jokes.
I'm sorry, I said all your best lines. Here, I'm just going to be quiet for the next hour, and you can talk. I think that probably works best anyway. It's past my bedtime.
But wait, what tradition are you? Or were you trained in, or both?
Sort of a vague... my high priestess, who I learned from, had been taught is sort of a more specific tradition of Wicca. By the time it got down to the group that I was in, that I was learning from her, she did sort of a generic Wiccan. It wasn't any particular kind of tradition. And I, at this point, am pretty eclectic. I'm more likely to call myself, a witch or a pagan than a Wiccan. I mean, I do have definite Wiccan leanings, but I use a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and I don't follow any real particular tradition. A lot of them were designed for groups that had, a high priest and a high priestess, and my groups, got me. So, so we just sort of wing it.
Oh, okay. Well, usually eclectic works pretty well. And of course, usually the term Wiccan tends to be used even if it's not 100% applicable, because the word witch outright tends to have bad PR.
It does, and that's actually ironically one of the reasons why I'm sort of using it more is where there's a number of us in the pagan community are trying to sort of reclaim that word as a more positive thing. A lot of us use Wiccan because it's something that the average person has heard of. If you say you're a Wiccan, they're like, oh, okay, they're weird, but I get it. If you say you're a witch, they tend to get confused and go hide under the bed, which, mind you, is okay with me. I like confusing people and making people hide under the bed. Everybody needs a hobby. But yeah, it is a sort of a tricky thing because a lot of people don't really know what you mean when you say witch. There's a lot of misconceptions, mostly brought about by, either religious propaganda and or Hollywood.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, I tolerate the Hollywood representation that, which instantaneously means telekinetic and stuff like that. I'm like, well, not really, but it's goofy and fun and brainless, and just check your brain at the door and all that.
Wow.
Well, are you trying to say I'm not telekinetic?
Uh-oh.
I don't know how telekinetic you are.
Don't make me reach through the internet and turn over coffee.
He's got enough problems with his sound now.
Yeah, now something's going to go wrong with it and you're going to blame me.
Well, I've got my words up. Actually, my own training was a combination of Celtic and Stregoria.
Oh, cool. Celtic and Italian, that's an interesting mix.
Well, my first teacher indicated that he was at someone's home, and I don't know if she was Spanish or Italian, but they were trying to explain. I guess it would have to be Italian because Spanish is brujo. But he pointed out, they were trying to explain to like the elderly grandmother what my teacher was. And finally, Vinny just goes, Strego. And she goes, oh. And she knew exactly what that meant. She was perfectly fine with it. Because some of those, pardon the expression, old country places are a little open-minded to the old ways and the old religions.
Well, most of them never gave them up. It's sort of interesting to me that in a lot of, again, the more European countries, they or even in some of the American things, they have no problem doing both. Like, in Ireland, they've got the goddess Brigid and the Saint Brigid, and they celebrate them both equally, and they don't see any issue with that. I think if you would ask them, they'd say, well, yes, and certainly there are some, depending on what your background is, there are probably some traditions that are much more what we would consider to be pagan, but for people, they're just part of their family history and part of the family traditions, and they can still be Christian or whatever else it is they practice at the same time.
Wow. All right. I think what we're going to do is take us a quick break and be about 5-6 minutes, something like that. So,
good. Bathroom break.
Give you time to do that. Just remember, your microphone is going to be live, so don't say anything or else just mute it till we come back on, and you'll hear me talking when we come back on.
All righty.
So with that, Jeff, you want to take us out?
Yep, you're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with your hosts Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat Barbara Duncan, and myself, Jeffrey Gould, with tonight's excellent guest, Deborah Blake. Blessed be. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View after the break.